Hari Om, welcome, Namaste, Namaskar, Shalom Alaikum, Shalom. I am Mathura Das, and I think this is my 22nd live share, broadcasting from the southwest of England during the lockdown, the world lockdown that we're all involved in. Um, and in my shares, generally what I do is I do three Om mantras just to get myself tuned in with spirit, with God, with the divine, and you can join me in that. And then I offer some prayers to my teachers, and then I will do some chants and maybe a song as well, and carry on with my long epic talk that's been going on for many shares, which goes back hundreds of years ago, describing how the East and the West became closer together, all sorts of historical processes, and then how me, as a young boy from southwest London in the 70s, teenager, got caught up with this whole these historical ripples. Met in my life, and I joined the Krishna movement at a very young age and got the name Mathura Das, even though I am from southwest London and not of Indian origins. And through my journey, we've been tracing how I got involved with the Krishna teachings, left home, went to Amsterdam, went to live in an ashram, did various things there, and then came to visit India first in 76, fell in love with it, and started reading all the literature about, specifically book about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who this tradition is founded upon. And so I'm going to be carrying on that story, because the story that I've been telling has taken me to the east part of Bengal, where the tradition of Gaudiya Vaishnavism was incredibly strong. It's now called Bangladesh. And so I've just relayed that in the last stories, and now I'm going to carry on and explain what's happened after travelling in some of the villages and coming back to Dacca. So I'm going to start to chant some Oms. If anybody's out there, please let me know and tell me if the sound is fine, please. I hope everything is fine. Yesterday, I highly apologize to anybody. I got the sound wasn't very good. I really hope it's going to be all right today, and we've solved the problem. Okay. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swabhadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paskachade Satarine. Hello and welcome to all my lovely friends, everybody, and Penny and Atmavidya, Ram Nishinga, it's wonderful. I'm sure there's loads more people. I could only see a few of you. Sorry about yesterday, the sound. I must have just pressed the wrong thing and I couldn't see the things until afterwards. But I know it is listenable because I listened to it yesterday. It's just not so good. I hope today is better. I think the closer I get to the microphone, it is. Okay, but I'm going to do some a little chant and a song before I start the story. And I've been just looking at some notes today, and well, Penny and most probably Penny and Mark are the only people, well, the first people really to read my manuscript, and so they know my story inside and out. And I've just been going checking it up, and I haven't looked at it for ages. And you know what you're getting now in my narrative overview is just really it's just currently it's much more detailed. And okay, well, I'm going to go back into that story after we've done a couple of songs. I'm just trying to think what I'm going to do. Every day is a different day, and the problem with the guitar, maybe one day. The mridanga here is not brilliant. It's a bit tight, and it's a bit weird. I don't know, just kind of doing mridanga and singing. Who knows, I might try some other things and without the guitar. But in terms of chants and things, and even my songs, I've got a limited repertoire. So bear with me. I'm sure you don't mind. Okay, change the key. Always have to do that, don't I? I tuned in yesterday to Deva Pramala Mitten doing their Gayatri Mantra thing around the world, and I've met them before. Whatever you want to think about where they're at, they're absolutely lovely people, very, very nice, sincere, and they've got a massive following. My goodness, thousands of people are all tuning in from all over the world and doing Gayatri. She just did some japa, and they did it very well, I have to say. I sat in with them for a while, and it's maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but I really appreciated that yesterday. And yeah, with purest intentions, really the purest of intentions. Okay, of course that's a very relative thing, as I'm going to describe a bit later about delving into the heart and the mystery of Gaudiya Vaishnava literature, and the subtleties and the nuances and the variations and the shades. And I'm so fortunate to have met Prabhupada and been connected with all this incredible tradition and all the gems and jewels that it has to offer. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudevaya, 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 Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate 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 Vasudevaya. Govinda Hare, Gopala Hare. 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 Jai Jaya Deva Hare. Jaya Jaya Deva Hare. Jai Prabhu Dina Dayala Hare. Jaya Prabhu Dina Dayala Hare. Govinda Hare, Gopala Hare. Jaya Deva Hari, Jaya Jaya Deva Hari, Jaya Jaya Deva Hari. Vande Krishna Nanda Kumara, Vande Krishna Nanda Kumara, Nanda Kumara Madana Gopala, Nanda Kumara Madana Gopala, Madana Gopala Mohana Rupa, Madana Gopala Mohana Rupa, Mohana Rupa Nanda Dulala, Mohana Rupa Nanda Dulala. Jai Jai Deva Hari, Jai Jai Deva Hari, Jaya Jaya Deva Hari, Jaya Jaya Deva Hari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Jai Deva Hari, Jai Jai Deva Hari, Jaya Jaya Deva Hari. Bolo Shri Krishna Bhagavan Ki Jai. I wonder, it'd be nice to know from all the different people, when you close your eyes and I say, um, Shri Krishna Bhagavan Ki Jai, what kind of image comes to your mind? What's the first image of Krishna that you see? It's funny, over the last few years, I have to say, when I close my eyes and I call to Krishna and think of Krishna, I mostly have the form of Radha Raman. The Murti comes into my mind. He's really somehow or other become my Ishta, we're spoiled. This is one of the great things on Facebook. We get to see all these incredible regular pictures, because when you go to the temple, he's only that big. You can't really see him. Without photography, you can't really truly appreciate his magnificence. So anyway, I just singing that song brought his image to my mind. I'm going to do Dark Night of the Soul because yeah, I know there's a lot of people are really going through it out there, and things like challenges in life, such as these. Funnily enough, I was just talking to my dear friend Nistragunya in Los Angeles, and he was saying, "What are you going to do when you finished all this? You're going, there's all these other stories to tell like, after this." And I went, "Right," and he just went list and listed. It's like some of my friends know all kind of the weird adventures I've had in my life. So, anyway, I was just realizing, how many kind of weird adventures, challenges I've had in my life, and some very strong existential challenges, and that's what this song "Dark Night of the Soul" is all about. Uh, um, I went through two very, very major ones, and one, as Atmavidya, we have a god brother who shared some adventures in life at Achetya, and he lived in Lüneburg, and I was going through a major crisis, very bizarre, living there in Lüneburg at his parents' house with his wife being pregnant from Nepal. Anyway, and all of my crises so far in my life, luckily, they have been some kind of purificatory ritual in life, where I've come out the other side, and actually, most probably, my strength in my faith has been kind of strengthened because it's in life you go through events where, and this is in the story that I'm going to tell, it's this whole story about going through and being kind of part of an institution, and then getting strong senses of individual kind of identity in relationship to the whole, and it's this thing like we're part of everything, but we still are who we are, and we have to go through our own stories and dramas, and dealing with our shadows and all sorts of challenges in life. And so this is we try to kind of sum this up, me and Prana, in this song, "The Dark Night of the Soul," that gets resolved. When everything you say gets twisted on the way, taken contrary, and everything you've done that seems a lot of fun is so far away. When you haven't got a lot, you're living in a squat, skimming through the bins, paying for your sins, trying to find a way. And the world's passing you by, every time you blink your eye, there goes another day. When you don't know what to do, you haven't got a clue what it's all about. And the people in your space are so much in your face that you wanna shout. You make a cup of tea when you've got a minute free, flick on the TV and everything you see is full of misery. And all the stuff you hear just covers you with fear and insecurity. When your life is full of doubt, you can't see a way out for your sanity. In the struggle and the fight, you watch the world lose sight of its humanity. And you're wondering why you were born at all, and if God's hiding there behind the wall we call reality. And if he's really there, why the hell am I here in this insanity? On the way to your goal, you'll pass the dark night of the soul, where you'll feel just like a bastard of creation, hanging over the abyss, where the snakes of hell all hiss. snapping as you pray in desperation. That's when you find you've got a friend on whom you can depend, who mysteriously appears as if from nowhere. Though his form you may not see, his presence sets you free, and he shows you the way home and how to go there. As daytime follows night, the shadows with the light start to disappear. The future's looking bright, it's gonna be alright, everything is clear. Now the road lights up as you dance along. You got a sense of purpose and you're feeling strong, full of energy. And then you realize it was angels in disguise come to set you free. 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 And then you realize it was angels in disguise come to set you free. As daytime follows night, the shadows with the light start to disappear. And they all lived happily ever after. Hopefully. Life's a circle of events, is it? It's a mixed bag of fortunes. That's the summation, really, of my evaluation of the complexity of life. Just have a sip. Welcome, everybody. Again, apologies from yesterday about the sound. Hopefully, it seems like it's all going to be okay today. And okay, so there we go. Thank you to viewers who've just tuned in, and to all my friends who've been regularly tuning in and following this story. I was just thinking about stories today and why I like them, because what's going to happen now in this part of this book is my story is I'm going to discover these stories, and when you look at really a lot of the cultures, even the Bible and stuff, a lot of its stories, and how many people really in the population of India read the Upanishads and the Vedas and the Vedanta Sutra. So quite a few people read the Bhagavad Gita, but not a huge amount. And a lot of people are just very familiar with the great itihasyas, the Mahabharata, and the Ramayana, and of course the Puranas. Because when you go, it's basically stories upon stories, and someone's telling a story, and someone's talking to someone. Look at the Bhagavad, it's Shukdev, Parikshit, lots of sages. Somebody hears the story, he goes off, speaks it to somebody else. And you've got all these lovely conversations in the Bhagavad of Vidura meeting Maitreya, and there's all these contexts and settings and stories behind everywhere. And I was just thinking about it today, and I suppose that's what I kind of realized, that by telling my story, that my whole goal was actually not to just tell my story, because my story is just my story involving lots and lots of other things and peoples and situations. And so hopefully by telling the story, and also kind of I'm constantly, as I'm going through this journey, because I was writing it for quite a while, over 5 years, one becomes quite reflective and contemplative about what's been going on really with one's life. And I did notice that when I traced this initial thing in my early life, when I was about, very young, it was this kind of idea that it's not all quite right out there in the world, and I'm going to try and find out what it's all about, even though that wasn't articulated. So through my journey through life, I've been had this kind of, you could say, a theme is almost being like an investigative journalist of life, viewed through my experience. And of course, and then you realize, my goodness, I mean, we've all got, I'm just telling you my story through this. I mean, everybody on the planet's got their story, and especially people connected with the story, they've got all their stories. And maybe events that we've shared together are interpreted and felt in different ways by the different individuals. One of my favourite books of all times, actually, and my authors, Hermann Hesse, I think I've mentioned before, his little allegory called Journey to the East. It really actually all starts with a character reflecting on his life, what has been, and then wondering what happened, and what happened to all these incredible people, and what they did, and where did they go, and what happened to this journey to the east that he was part of. And it's an amazing little book. You can read it in a few hours, and it's amazing because I read it when I was 16, then read it many years later, and then it had much more poignancy. Because he was a mature man, he really tapped into an archetypal pattern and a situation. And you could say this story is in a bit in this pattern, because this was lots of what I've been reciting is based on my reflections. I'm just my manuscript that I worked on while I was in Missouri from 2006 to 2012, over 5 years, not constantly, but while I was there, I went through it all. And so that's, people must say, how does he remember it all? It's because I have gone through this and written it down, and I haven't been kind of reading my manuscript a lot recently, but I will be working on it because I want to finish it and get it edited. But you look at there's so many things to say in a picture, and as you go along in the story, reflecting on things. So while I'm going through in my journey, my story, I'm going through a journey. ISKCON is going through its journey, and it's because nothing is static in life. And this is really what's going on in stories, aren't they? They're events leading to another events, and people coming into pictures and things that go on in stories. And so this is my way, has been my way, a way in to the into the whole complexity of, rather than just writing a kind of sociological study of the Hare Krishna movement, I thought that at least I will attempt to write a kind of a personalized story experience of my experience, and with my reflections based on who I am and what I think, and years of reflecting and conversations with other kind of peers as well about these things, going into deep spaces to try and comprehend this story, because life is big. And originally I was going to call my book A Contemporary Slice of Life, after Between Worlds, because it's just this one little, I'm just this little slither of reality focusing on this thing that we're all going through. Okay, so, and I've also mentioned how books actually were the big, discovering books when I was 16 was the big turning point in my life. The authors, specifically people like Hermann Hesse, they became like my gurus, because I was so starved from wisdom going through the kind of brutal educational system, in England at least, which just was so kind of unsuited to my temperament, that when I kind of got out of it, I discovered this other world. It was like, wow, real life isn't just all about this and what they're trying to get you to accept as reality. There's all these other possibilities. It opened the doors to all these possibilities, and and also, and I wasn't the only one. That's part of my story. A whole generation, really, they were going through a similar kind of syndrome, really, and wanting to kind of go off and try and figure out, what is there, some kind of higher purpose than just kind of like becoming a cog in a system that one doesn't really believe in. And it's also quite detrimental to one's individuality, people's spirituality, to the planet. Is there an alternative way of being and seeing things? So that was always my motive, and my perspective on life, really, that's led me to this point, to the where you've been following me through the jungles of Bangladesh into these most incredible situations with this culture where it's been going on for literally, over about 400 years, generation after generation of these people in these very rustic situations generally, even though I went to some cities, but mostly it was off in the villages. And I've described, the level of the devotion and the charm of the lifestyle. And okay, maybe I was having a kind of a privileged perspective or a unique perspective due to the nature of us being Western devotees, us engaging in just in programs and interacting on a certain level. So our experience was quite unique. But then I got ill, had to come back to return to Dacca, and by this time the heat at this time is rising, rising, rising. We're getting to May now, somewhere in May, and I've come back to Dhaka, and become very, very sick, and my illness is being diagnosed as jaundice, which is quite strong. It could have been a worse symptom, but as soon as it was diagnosed, I knew what not to eat, things to eat, and Elapati was cooking some very special little things for me. I can't even remember what they were, but they were, I think, soups and things. And he was coming out in a rash in the kitchen because it was so hot. And I really always remember him for his selfless, brotherly love and helping, especially cooking stuff in extreme circumstances for me. But I started, and I had lots of glucose and lemon juice, and I wasn't feeling really bad like I did on the other days, but just no energy and scratchy and kind of slightly strange dreams. And then after when they realised that I was kind of okay, um, they said, "Look, we're going to go off for a few days. You'll be all right, won't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I'll be fine." I wasn't scared of being alone. There was a Mully, a gardener, was the only person that was coming every day and doing all the gardening around. And I said, okay. And they went off. And there I was in Dhaka and Tejkunipara all by myself. And it took me a while to realize that because previous in my story, I mentioned that at one period I went off to meet B.G. Sharma in 1978, just briefly, and I was on a train, and that was the first time I realised I'd kind of really been travelling by myself for a couple of days. And up until then, basically every day of my life was with somebody, with a group, doing something, and now suddenly everyone's gone, and I'm by myself. And it was a bit eerie at the beginning, and it didn't take long. And I was we had this kind of a room where Vyasaki had his trunks on one side, and he had a whole kind of collection of his cassettes that he had made, these fantastic recordings of these kirtan groups, and I think he said I could listen to them, but anyway, I did. I had a tape recorder, and I think most probably the day after they're gone, I was just kind of like, I was went on the roof, walked around, trying to get used to the whole feeling of, right, okay, I'm by myself. And, wasn't, it'd been also intense, this whole last bit, the confrontation in Amsterdam, Bhagwan, going over land, doing all this thing, coming to the Mayapur, traveling around, all these incredible experiences, and suddenly, and it was all quiet, and it was, I was by myself. And I think it was the next morning I went to sleep and woke up. And while I was just doing my japa, walking around, it was so hot. I had and we had load shedding for hours and hours and hours. So much of the time, the heat was building up, the humidity, and there was not even fans, and it was austere. It was quite austere, and all I had on was most probably just a gumsha, and then as I was doing my japa, I'd noticed these books kind of sitting on Vyasaki's trunk. They were, didn't look like they'd even been read yet. They looked new, and there was a blue one and a green one, and they were very, from the exteriors, looked incredibly boring and not attractive. I mean, it's amazing how Prabhupada went to all this incredible effort to present Vedic literature to the masses, and he got, these lovely covers, and they were very attractive, and they were quite seductive in their publication. That these two editions were very, I mean, humble, but very, very old school. You look something maybe from the 20s, or some kind of old penguin print. If you saw something from a really archaic, low cost, and it really didn't strike me. I just didn't really think. I I I've been so active and doing stuff that I'd forgotten the charm of actually sitting down and really reading. I really hadn't been in that space since reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which I just went and read the whole thing through when they came out in 1975. And now this is like 4 years later. I haven't really had a really deep reading experience until hadn't been in that space, I suppose, for some reason. And there, these books were there. And I looked at it, the blue one first, because it was thinner, and the title kind of really attracted me. Brihad Bhagavatamritam. By Sanatana Goswami. Right. Okay. How come I'd never heard of that before, Well, we all knew about Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Rupa Goswami because Prabhupada had done his summary study of it as the Nectar of Devotion. But I wasn't a big pundit at that time, even though I'd read lots of the books. I hadn't picked up on this book, Brihad Bhagavatamritam, so it was kind of novel. I had no idea at all what to expect was underneath this cover. So I just sat down there, opened the book, and then this magic thing has happened. It's the same as when I was younger, when I started to read and get into that space. And it's happened to me again and again. At certain times in one's life, certain books come into one's life, and you just start opening the book, and they can be incredibly transformative, and take you on a journey, and can be quite crucial part of one's whole development in spirituality, psychology, and anything. So I'm plugging books and the reading, even though I've been a bit lax in the last few years. But so the introduction was a very, very interesting. It was about the history of Sanatana Goswami, and I hadn't realized lots of the details about his family background, and got read as soon as he started I started reading that, I was in, because I have this beautiful taste for the culture. Here I was in Bengal, and it was all the background. I had the background atmosphere in my head. I was around it all, and lots of his family came from South India, and then they came to stay up centuries before in Bengal, and then it describes him, Rupa, their brother Anupama, and the nephew Jiva, and lots of the stories that I was familiar with, but it was and some of them not. So I was immediately hooked, and I was kind of enjoying it, and I was going. And then I would had the tape recorder, and had in the background while I was kind of reading these. I had either some really lovely Santor music, or I had just discovered this album called Call of the Valley, which was lovely, which was flute and Santor and guitar, and it was very ambient. And so I had my kind of theme music on in the background while I was going on this journey very quietly, totally by myself, and not being in this space at all. And so these types of kind of experiences in life, quarantine, getting stuck somewhere, being sick, being in jail or incarcerated, can also be great periods in one's life, where they're given there for a specific purpose. If you are kind of a positive type person and realize that that's what you're here in life for, to go on a journey, and everything that's given to you is part of the educational package that you're meant to get, to know what it is that you're meant to know. Because atato brahma jignasa, now let us inquire, what is the absolute truth? What is everything? Was it the unexamined life is not worth living, as Socrates said. So there we go. I'm in that space. I've gone back into that space, inner reflective rather than frantic out there, which has been fantastic. Had some great experience, but now there was this different period. And there you start off. And it's really interesting because up until then, the Bhagavatam, the Srimad Bhagavatam, I'd been a bit intimidated actually by it as a literature. It was very formalized the way that it was. We did with Bhagavad Gita, but I suppose both of those literatures were the dealing in the formality that we do in the temples in ISKCON, where we do a shloka and then there's a verse and somebody sits on a seat and then we go through it, and it's quite a lot of it hasn't been a literature that I've just picked up and read. So, and the Brihad Bhagavatamritam, as the author, the person who's doing the introduction, who was called Yati Maharaj, I think, unless he worked with some other person from the Gaudiya Math. These books were published by the Gaudiya Math in Madras, which is one of their main centres, and they had different Vaishnavas in the Gaudiya Math doing their translation work and publishing these other literatures that most Western devotees up until that time, not all, but most, had not encountered. And it was mostly devotees like Vyasaki and me and other devotees who had an affinity with India, who kind of got in contact with these books and wanted to know more about our tradition. And the Brihad Bhagavatamritam, as Sanatana Goswami explains, it means the Amrit, it's the nectar which is churned out of the Bhagavatam. So the Bhagavatam it's so many skandhas and stories, and it's very formal. It's a Purana, and so the wonderful thing is that Sanatana Goswami has presented two stories in this literature that are designed to kind of make it really easy for one, a bit like the Itihasyas and the other stories, which they provide stories to explain complex and theological, metaphysical the things that maybe people might get put off by reading in a formal Purana. But in these form of these stories, you can kind of enter into this world and get access to that whole world, going to get an overview without getting bogged down, you could say, in the formality that you might not be that it's maybe just too much for one. So this is what happened to me anyway. This is my perspective, because as soon as I started reading the story, I was hooked right from the beginning. And the first part of the story is Narada. And through reading Brihad Bhagavatamritam and from my other books, I started to get real affinity for Narada Muni as a character, as a personality, and really value him and in the whole cosmic scheme of things, and how important he is. And his character is extremely charming and very attractive, no less than the Supreme Lord himself. And actually, he's in our lineage, if you want to accept the Brahma Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, because it comes from Brahma down to Narada, and then it comes down to Vyas, and then it comes down all this way. So Narada is on a quest, basically, and he's to find the greatest devotee, or the recipient of Krishna's mercy. He wants to find out who's the greatest recipient of Krishna's mercy. And the whole story starts off in Allahabad at the Mela, basically. And there's a description of this Brahmin. He's doing all these pujas and he's doing these incredible things. And Narada's just completely, wow. He's looking at his bhakti and his devotion, and he thinks this person has got the mercy of Vishnu, and he approaches him and says, "My dear Brahmin, it seems like the Lord himself has blessed you with all these good qualities." And he's very humble. He says, "No, no, 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 no. My bhakti is nothing. My level of devotion is very minuscule." In South India, and he describes this king and this kingdom and how it is. And Narada Muni is. This is actually how the story goes. And it's the charm of the story, where it just takes you from one a scenario where you think, wow, that's incredible, to another scenario which is just a little step up, which is more incredible. And when and you're just getting used to each scenario. I mean, in the king, it describes, everything is perfect in his kingdom. The rain and it comes at the right time, and the seasons, and everyone's happy, festivals and food, and he describes all this incredible world. And then he goes to the king and says, "It seems, my dear Lord," and then the king goes, "We are nothing. We are just mere mortals compared to Indra, the god of heavens, And when he just starts describing how incredible Indra is, Narada goes, and he goes off to Swarg, to Indralok. And there's incredible descriptions and very interesting um, details that you maybe kind of missed in the Bhagavat, like this incredible phenomena of Vishnu appearing and being worshipped on different dimensions, and how he appears and what's the relationship of the people in those different dimensions. So as you're going on the journey, you're accompanying Narada Muni in this transcendence. It's very interesting. This thing you have to kind of go through things, and things make sense when you go through a kind of a journey from one level to another. And um, and as Narada goes higher, this same phenomena keeps happening, and he keeps being told about these great people, and all these great archetypes, from Hanuman up to Shiva, and then also going up to the top he meets all the great characters. I mustn't mix up the two stories. Okay, Narada meets all the great characters in the story of Bhakti, and yes. I don't want to get mixed up the story. And so, what really ultimately happens is that Narada comes to he goes through all the different levels of the bhaktas. That's it, and he comes to Dwarka, and there's a scene basically because Krishna hasn't woken and he's in delirium. And the residents of Dwarka are very concerned because he's in his room and they're all waiting outside. And he's kind of moaning and groaning and calling out the names of the residents of Vrindavan. And what happens is they decide to kind of pacify Krishna. And Vishwakarma, just out at a distance from Dwarka, creates a kind of replica of Braj. With his kind of a kind of spiritual, you could say, Disneyland, and the Govardhan and the Jamuna and the residents of Vrindavan. He makes a kind of a facsimile, and it's so real. And while he's still in his kind of dreamy trance state, Krishna, Garuda takes him and flies him there. And when he lands and sees the residents of Vrindavan, and they're in this world called the Novel Vrindavan that Vishwakarma's made, he is pacified. And so, what you learn in the story is as Narada goes through and meets all the great archetypes and all these great personalities, you realize there's this kind of, because it's when you use the word bhakti, it's a big word, and it's conceived and expressed in different ways. In the different Vaishnava Sampradayas. I had a kind of conversation with Guru Keshava a few weeks back, because he's very much connected with the Sri Sampradaya, and they have different kind of way and interpretation of bhakti and the paradigms. So this is very, very much from the Gaudiya perspective that most probably shares correlations more with maybe Nimbaka and with the Vallabhas, because they concentrate on the Bhagavat in a similar type of way and have Krishna as the Ishta of the whole story. And which means that within the whole kind of one's perception within the Vedic paradigm, one has an attachment to an aspect or the Supreme Lord in one of his various forms that becomes predominant. And from that faith in that predominant form, one sees the world in relationship to one's relationship with that specific form of the Lord. There's nothing that you can do about it. That is an existential kind of prerogative. Okay. So Narada, the essence of the story is that by going through all these different Vaishnavas with their different shades of bhakti, you eventually come to Braj. And because their bhakti is so strong that it has this kind of power, strong power, even over Krishna himself. And it's unalloyed. It's not even mixed with jnana and with karma. And so that's really the kind of, and I entered into that world and I was like, wow, that was just amazing. It just took me off, and I read it quite quickly. And then I was wondering what the second book was going to be like, or the second part of the same book. And the second part is about Gopakumara, who's this young cowherd boy, and he gets a mantra, and his beloved is Krishna, Madan Gopal, and he goes on a search himself to find his beloved. And it's got certain parallels with the Narada story, but the difference is that Narada is a very famous kind of he's the messenger of the gods, whereas Gopakumar is a very endearing cowherd boy who's actually from Braj on Earth, and he just goes on his journey up and up, and it's very and he it's a it, there also is these parallels to it's a bit like this kind of phenomena of being there every time he goes somewhere, and he sees these phenomena, he somehow ends up becoming the king, or then he becomes the king of heaven, and he has takes on all these posts and roles, and then he's not satisfied by it, and when he gets to a certain stage of heaven, some kind of being from another level will come there, and he'll go, he's very naive. He doesn't really know what's going on. He'll go, "Who's that?" And the people are very charmed. He's Gopakumar. He says, "Actually, don't you know that is so and so from that level?" And he lives. And they go, and he goes, "Wow, I've got to go there." And he just goes on this journey and this journey and journey and goes up and up. And on the way, there's an incredible the vision of the cosmos and the journey, all these things that are described in the Bhagavatam, which are sometimes hard to get your head around. That he takes you on this kind of cosmic journey and has these visions, and he sees the Puranic way of seeing the universe. It's not really Hubble telescope stuff. It's a kind of different world, and I like when he gets up to these really high dimensions. He goes way beyond just normal Svarg of Indra. He goes to Gyanalok and Tapalok. Gyanalok is the kind of abode of the Kumaras, and it's the who are the kind of Ishta Devatas of Gyana Mishra Bhakti, and it's a kind of wow, fascinating terms these, and it describes the kind of cosmic consciousness that they have, even though it's got bhakti there as well. It's a very different type of bhakti than the bhakti of the residents of Braj or Vaikuntha, at least as according to Brihad Bhagavatamritam. I'm sure they have all different kinds of aspects to their personalities, and that was one of the conversations that Gopa Kumara has with Narada as he's going on his journey, and everywhere he goes, he keeps bumping into Narada, and he goes, "How is it? When I'm there, you're there, you're there, you're there, you're there, you're everywhere." And Narada kind of gives him a talk and winks at him, and he goes, "Look." And Narada is known as Bhakta Bhagavan. He's a Parshad, and he is God in the form of a devotee, if you can say. He is the personification of the ultimate Bhakta. The Bhakta Narada, the Narada Bhakti Sutras, written by Narada, and the what he explained to Gopakumar is that really when you're free and liberated from the confines of your material identity and have attained your swarup or your nitya dharma, you're basically on some levels not God, but you share many of the potencies and the potencies of his energies, and like being in different places simultaneously at the same time, way beyond just the mystic siddhis of expanding your body. He goes into a different level. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we in the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we have the Pancha Tattva, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita, Gadadhar, and Srivas, are called the Pancha Tattva. And in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's quite a long, in-depth theological study of the Pancha Tattva by Krishnadas Kaviraj. And Srivas is the tattva. He's considered Narada. He represents the jiva as part of the absolute truth in the most kind of like perfect form. Narada's kind of like the perfected jiva, and it's about as perfect as you can get. And no wonder he's my ultimate hero. In fact, I mean, Okay, I don't need to talk about that, but I have such an affinity that, I mean, really, my ultimate dream would be to be a kind of. I know that he's got Tumburu and he's got a few friends and people that are not talked about, but I wouldn't mind being connected with them for a while or forever, really, because I just think that's, it's very exciting and incredible. Part to play in the divine scheme of things. Anyway, we all just get inspired by these archetypal personages who are the great characters of these stories. And so that's what Narada was telling Gopakumara, that really the liberated souls are basically very similar to God. They just, the potency is just lesser. They share so many of the qualities of the divine. And so Narada so Gopakumara goes higher and higher and higher, and then he gets to the edge of the universe. Even he goes beyond Brahma Loka, and the higher residents who live right at the top of the universe. They're having an amazing life, but still, one day that whole universe is going to collapse, and it's just a temporary manifestation in time and space, even though it is trillions of years. And then Gopakumara, there's this incredible, as he goes through the different levels of the edges of the universe, he penetrates them. And then he comes to the Brahma Jyoti, that which is the Brahmavadis are attracted to that aspect of the absolute, the Nirguna Brahman aspect of the light. And it's incredible how, as you're going through the journey, Gopakumara's, or it's so powerful, the light, that he's almost subsumed into it, and it's only because he suddenly remembers his Gopal mantra that the kind of like the light clears and he goes through and he enters into the other dimension, really beyond. I think he enters into Shiva Loka before after the Brahma Jyoti, as far as I remember. Hope it isn't the other way around. People can correct me if I'm wrong. And then he goes to Mahesh Dham, and there it's revealed Shiva's just not any old Deva, like some people derogatory speak. Shiva has his domain beyond the material world in Mahesh Dham. He is non-different than the Supreme Lord in just a different form, and Shiva, and he has his incredible world there. And each time he goes there, they all just love to see Gopakumara, and Gopakumara's there. But they just kind of say, you've got to go further, you've got to go a little bit further. You're not quite there where your heart is yearning for. And he goes further, and then he goes to Ayodhya, the spiritual realm of Vaikuntha. And that's very endearing as well, because there's quite a lot of tension building as you get up there, because you're really thinking, I wonder what it's going to be like when he actually meets Vishnu in his abode there in Vaikuntha. And and as he gets to Vaikuntha, he sees these people who he thinks are Vishnu because they look like Vishnu, and he goes to offer his respect, and they go, oh, no, and they put their hand, no, no, we are not Vishnu, we look like Vishnu, and they were, everyone's charmed because Gopakumara is so endearing. He's always looking like this young cowherd boy, and this is the abode of Aishwarya and majestic opulence with kind of pillars of spiritual gems and people. It's majesty, the majesty aspect of the divine. And they said, no, no, go forward, go this way. And he goes through these kind of gateways into the sanctum sanctorum, and the tension's building up. And then when he arrives there, I remember when I was reading this, I was sitting there in Tejkunipara, sitting in Bangladesh during a hot season. But actually, I'm off in this story. I'm off in this world with Gopakumara, and there is Vishnu says, "My dear Gopakumara, where have you been? I'm missing you so much. Please come here." And it's incredible. I remember really thinking, sorry, Vishnu is not some kind of officious GBC member, authority figure. He's actually some kind of he's a very charming, beautiful, loving person who's our Lord and our eternal friend. And kind of another one of these institutional hang-ups to get free from that. I have a relationship with Krishna. No, forget all that stuff. Krishna, Vishnu. This is what I am part of. This is the spiritual tradition and the Varg that I've been introduced to by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada from Mahaprabhu Nityananda and the lineage, and to be able to kind of introduce to these incredible concepts. And then Sanatana Goswami writing this incredible literatures. And it's interesting to note that it describes in the introduction that this specific literature, there's different literatures in the Vaishnava canon that deal with the different tattvas, Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. And Briha Bhagavatamritam deals specifically with Sambandha. This journey and this spiritual adventure that we've been going on, sharing, that Sanatana Goswami is sharing, it's taking us to Krishna, Sambandha. There's some of the literatures in Abhideya and Prayojana, like Govinda Lilamrita. There's none of the preliminary stuff or philosophical background. You're just right into the very top levels, and the way that the leader is described as of the supreme highest level. There's different categories. So for me, and I would highly recommend that for most Vaishnavas, before, if you haven't already, don't jump to these higher tattvas quite yet. I would start with Briha Bhagavatamritam if you haven't read any other literatures outside Bhagavad Gita and Chaitanya Charitamrita, because this is a book that you can feel safe and comfortable with, in the sense of the level of intimacy that it's going to introduce you is very intimate, but it's the way that it takes you into the story, and that's the beauty of storytelling. Really, is that you go on a journey with the storyteller, and that's what I was doing. I was going on this journey and being introduced to these different wonderful aspects of God, and meeting Vishnu. It's the same. You go into that world. There was parts in the book, I have to say, I was becoming so deeply into it, and the English in these, and everybody knows in these old Gaudiya Math editions, it's rather archaic English. There's kind of like a whole bunch of sentences that you have to take a deep breath, to say the whole thing, because it's but it's quite endearing despite all of that, and so I was be reading, and then it'd be almost to the point where I'd become overwhelmed, and I'd have to just close the book. It was almost like the light coming out of the book was so strong, and I would have to go, whew, it was like, steady on, oh boy. and I hadn't experienced anything like this for quite a while. I had to say, even when I was reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, I had some great experiences, but being this journey that I've gone through, being mature and being in this space, Krishna providing a time where I'm just in seclusion in this space, to have no distractions, what to say, to go completely immerse myself in this divine narrative, and yeah, I was becoming overwhelmed again and again, and I'm having these kirtans in the background. I'd be Nityananda Sampradaya going Hare Krishna in the background, and doing all there was a few, Monoranjam Sheel, he had some great recordings. I wonder if he's still got those in his kirtan archives. I bet he has. And then Gopal Kumara goes from just by Kunta to Ayodhya, and then he comes to that to Goloka, and there's the famous picture that devotees got commissioned from B.G. Sharma that was used on the front cover of that book that Sridhar Maharaj did. Isn't it called The Search of the Beloved? I think it is. And there's the picture of Gopal Kumara embracing Krishna on the front cover. It's an absolutely beautiful picture, and but what it's the scene when I'm not going to give it away, actually, because you have to go there, you have to experience this experience when he eventually arrives in Goloka. What actually happens? It's an incredible experience, absolutely incredible, and then it goes into details, and I was so enlivened. I mean, my japa during this time when I was going through the book, I can't remember how many days it was. It wasn't that many. I mean, it was constantly in there, almost all day long, reading. That's what happens when I get lost in a book. And then I kind of finished that, and I maybe went out and did a bit of shopping on a bike or something, like on a rickshaw. And then it's like, okay, the next book, and the next book was Jaiva Dharma by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Again, another story. In fact, apparently, this book Jivadharma that Bhaktivinoda wrote in the Victorian period, so it's much later period than Sanatana Goswami's book, which is in the 16th, 17th century, I think he wrote it, either 17th or 16th, 16 something. It was around there, you know. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Jivadharma was written in the later Victorian period, around the 1870s, 1880s, or something like that. And he was taking a literary form, this type of kind of format, in the way that he was trying to express what is Gaudiya Vaishnava Tattva and the whole philosophy. It was a very ingenious way of the time, and in the form of a story, but it's a certain kind of way of telling a story. And again, both of these literatures, after being a devotee and going through this whole journey like I had since 1970, late 73, this was kind of quite. It was a part of my educational process that I had neglected, and it's something that I really needed to catch up on. And one of the one of the problems that is there in the Krishna movement, and there's also mostly reasons for it, is that um, there was this kind of expanding ISKCON activities, being very active, and that was all part of being part of the Krishna movement. But Prabhupada was putting all this effort into writing all these books because he realized that that's the essence of this whole culture, this whole kind of institution, and then this thing and that thing. These are actually external things, really, apart from Harinam Sankirtan. That's part of the Dharma. Okay, I'm not going to minimize anything, but the what I'm going to I suppose my point is that the if you had any kind of real kind of intellectual or contemplative type of nature, and you wanted to just spend time studying or reading, it was not encouraged. It was not encouraged. If you wanted to do something like that, you would have to really, I don't know, you would have to make some time in between the busy schedule of being a full-time devotee. And I know from my friend like Madan, who joined ISKCON after I left it, really, he had a real problem, a confrontation with devotees in the temple because he was reading other literature that just wasn't from Prabhupada. It was part of the Gaudiya canon, where Prabhupada had actually, if Prabhupada had been on the planet for longer, he would have just carried on translating more and more and more, and he couldn't, so he didn't have enough time. But he mentions in his books which of the books to read: Briha Bhagavatamritam, Govinda Leelamrita, Krishna Bhav, and he mentions this. But you pass these one of the purports in the Chaitanya Charitamrita if you're not really focusing. But there are guidelines about kind of different ways of kind of entering into this culture and expanding one's kind of understanding of the nature of the Puranic paradigm. What is this great literature, the Puranas, the contemporary interpretations of the philosophy at the time of Chaitanya through Chaitanya Charitamrita and later commentaries by different acharyas in our lineage. I mean, many of my friends, like I was just mentioning, Madan and Jagannath Mishra, and there's Jagannananda, and quite a few other devotees, they got deeply involved with the language, which unfortunately I didn't. So that's kind of where I'm a bit lacking in my kind of perspective. I've been kind of dependent on English translations and I've been following more of an aesthetic, artistic story in these later years rather than a literary path, whereas many of my other friends have been maybe focusing and then got deeply involved, so deep that they've gone and learned Sanskrit and Bengali and gone deeply into this literature, because it's really at the essence of bhakti. There's all sorts of practices that are involved in the process of connecting with the divine. Shravana, and there's the Nova Anga of bhakti. Here, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Archanam, and Atmani Vedanam. And but the most important is Shravana. It's hearing, chanting, and Smaranam. These are the three key elements, and Satatam Kirtayantam Mam. Krishna says that my devotees take great pleasure in hearing and chanting my glories, and that's where the taste, the actual experience of of experiencing the beauty and of the supreme and the divine Leela. Because if you don't know about the person who you're purportedly devoted to, and in a journey to try and fall in love with, the whole process should be ultimately about finding more and more and more about your beloved. And the more that you know, then the more that you can love. And the more that, and then it becomes, it's a reciprocal thing, and everything's guided and inspired by Krishna, because that's what he says in the Gita. I'm in within your heart, and I'm guiding you. So it's according to what you want and the intensity of your lobe, because that is one of the things that Rupa Goswami says. It's a how, how deep is your love, what is the intensity of if you want something in this world, you go out, you put incredible amount of energy and focus, and anything in life, if you want to get something out of it, it's to do with the intensity of which you go to get something. It's kind of a greed, and that's what lobe is. So in the spiritual in life, according to the level of one's intensity uh, of purpose, really, in the whole process, one engages in a kind of reciprocal kind of relationship with the Supreme. Um, Lots of all this is kind of unfathomable for people who are kind of stuck on Brahman or into Nirvisesha or pure Advaita, because even when they hear, they don't quite get it, do they? It's funny because the paradigms are kind of reversed. Those who are attracted to the Brahma Gyan, the Brahma aspect, the impersonal Nirguna Brahman, they perceive, and they're commentators, they interpret that the actual Leela and the forms of Krishna that are described are actually transformations of the mode of goodness. They're not actually divine, they're spiritual. That's what their commentators say. They think that's why Vaishnavas call them Mayavadis, because they believe that ultimately the forms of God are actually illusory, because beyond that is the non-dual Brahman. With no shape and no form. And the Vaishnavas see it the other way, according to their interpretations, and is that the supreme Godhead is a divine personality with a form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss, who through the spiritual effulgence which radiates from the divine is what is called the Brahma Jyoti, which is the goal of the followers of Advaita. So and I've had this confirmed in my life and my story. It's not just kind of some prejudice from Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Even when I went to Badrinath with my dear friend Shivanath, who's very erudite, and never, it's the only time I've ever been there, and we were at the doors of the temple, and Shivanath started to recite the Brahma Samhita. And while we were there, one chap came up and he said, he was so impressed. He said, "Would you like to meet the head priest? I can introduce you." And we said, "Yeah, sure." And we went into this little house, and there were these quite young chaps from South India who had been brought up generation after generation to be the head pujaris in Badrinath. And they were very super friendly and very, very nice. But almost immediately, and he knew that we were connected with the Krishna movement and have from a Vaishnava Sampradaya, because and then he said, "You do know, though, don't you, that Vishnu is nothing but the transformation of the mode of goodness?" I was like, I was dumbfounded, really, and I was thinking, why are you doing the puja then to it? But that's the way of India, and that's the way of India. So, and everybody, when they their relationship to the different stories and the forms of Krishna, unless you get this kind of like kind of this feeling, or that you have the grace really of Param Vaishnavas who traverse this path and actually carry Krishna in their heart. It's almost impossible to understand, because it's not something empiric. You can't come to these conclusions and have these things revealed to you empirically. It's something that you become attracted to by grace and revelation and good, and your natural aptitude, basically. Um, What's the time now? Okay, we're getting up to 9 o'clock. Oh, my computer is running out. Excuse me. I'm just getting my power. There we go. Sorry, my computer's nearly out. So, after, and the Jiva Dharma book, I'll carry on back and explain a bit about Jiva Dharma. It's set at the time just post Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Bengal, but it involves certain characters. And one of the characters is somebody who has been attracted to the path of Advaita. I suppose that's why I was bringing it up, because what's going to happen is while he's in this character, who's described by Bhakti Vinod Thakur in the book, is he sees some people in Varanasi singing Haribol and showing signs of bliss and ecstasy, and he's never seen anything like it. And he asks about some people, who are these people and where are they from? And he says, oh, they're followers of Chaitanya and Bengal and all of and where he describes they describe to him, and immediately he wants to find out more about this, because somehow or other, after getting involved with Gyan and studying all these kind of scriptures, he was finding it very dry. There was something missing in his whole spiritual search, and so he ends up going to this kind of archetypal idyllic he meets these Vaishnavas, this community that lives around Navadvip area, and the whole book is an incredible. It's again by telling a story rather than just having a text with philosophical things. It's a way of entering into using the form of the story and a kind of almost like a drama of entering into where, because it's questions and answers and various characters, they cover all sorts of subjects that, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur was, this wasn't in English, he wrote it in Bengali. It was directed at the Bhadralok, the educated middle class of Bengal at the time. And he was in this very unique position because he'd gone through this as a magistrate. He was well aware of the British system of education and also of Western literature. He was very aware and of also the local trends of the different other intellectuals that were transforming Bengali culture of their day. And he was part of that wave. And so he'd written, I think earlier than that, he'd written quite kind of radical books called Sri Krishna Samhita just before he got initiated. And Jiva Dharma is a bit later in the story. And all these different things to do with social dharma, spiritual tattvas, is a relationship with Sufism, Islam, Tantra. All these different stories are different aspects of what Jiva Dharma, what is the nature of the soul, and it goes higher and it goes gradually as the book goes, it gets more and more refined because the character gets more and more instructed in the whole process, and the level of questioning gets higher and higher. There's one chapter, and I don't know if everybody had noticed it, but it's called the Deliberation on Nam Tattva, and it's interesting because for me it is because anyway you'll see what the Baba. One of the persons in the story, outside of his hut, he notices an ascetic, a Vairagi, a follower of most probably Ramanandi Sampradaya, and with dreadlocks, and and there was a couple of them, and they were. He describes that they were kind of in smoking chillums, basically with hemp. And he goes and he meets them, and they're very respectful. And there's a conversation about it's called the Deliberation of Nam Tattva. There's a description. It's between these Vairagi Babas and this other Baba. I always just found that interesting. The fact that the way that Bhaktivinoda wasn't demeaning to these babas because they were smoking chillums. It wasn't, he was actually, they actually went and had these chillums, and they had a discussion on divine subject matter. And so I apparently his maternal grandfather from his mother's side in Orissa was also a bit of used to wear orange cloth and smoke chillums, and he was the one that just before he died called Bhaktivinoda Thakur to his bed and told him that he was going to become a Vaishnava and get a good job before it happened. So I've read that in the autobiography of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and in his book. Anyway, it's just part of one of my little observations because it's not really mentioned in any other books. Um, so it deals with Jaiva Dharma. I learned so much stuff, all these different details about Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had wanted to express, because during his research, he'd gone through so many works of the Goswamis and the different followers of Chaitanya to get to the heart and the subtle theological issues of what made Gaudiya Vaishnavism unique and its very specific path, and its the intimacy of the level of where its ultimate goal is. Now, this is going to this where I am in the story at this moment is. A part of the story where um, lots of issues connected with things that are mentioned in these books that by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and actually how they were um, 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 enacted in Bengali culture. There's kind of controversies that have come down, because after Bhaktivinoda Thakur, some of the practices and things that he mentions in some of the books were considered quite taboo by Gaudiya Math after that, and maybe I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just kind of mentioning that's going to be something that I'm then going to consider, because after this whole kind of story, I'm going to do a kind of a retrospective analysis on many of the things that I've explained in this journey of where the Gaudiya Math, ISKCON, its journey, its expansion, and at a certain point, look at what kind of issues it's involved in its developmental processes that have been beneficial, and some which have still haven't been resolved to this day. There's all sorts of kind of interesting issues involved with it. Um, I'm just looking at the time now. I think I might. Okay, so what happened to me is I'm just going to resolve the kind of the story in Bangladesh, because I wasn't actually going to stay that much longer in Bangladesh, and it wasn't really my decision, because even though I was ill and sick, I was hoping I was going to recover. But and then Vyasaki and Elapati came back from traveling, and then it was like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm still quite sick. What is it? And the doctor had already had said that it's good to leave a place if you can go somewhere cooler and more relaxing, because it was so extreme. And so I had a conversation, and it was discussed amongst them. He said, let's call Prabhavishnu and let's ask him. Because I said, maybe I should go up to Kathmandu because it's much cooler there, and just relax and wait till I get my strength back and then come back. That was what I was thinking about. And when I called Prabhavishnu, he was absolutely kind of, I was just absolutely shocked, really. I can't remember all the kind of stuff he said, because he was a very unemotional, kind of expressive person. But he kind of just he said, "No, you can't, and I don't have enough money to send you." They didn't. He couldn't be prepared to just pay for a cheap flight to go up to Kathmandu, and I was just thinking, I was a bit in shock after it, because I hadn't got I just automatically thought that he thought that I was somebody. I'd come overland, risk my life and limb, come over here. I was quite a valuable member, I would have thought, of the whole part of Yatra, contributive, a very valuable resource. I mean, the whole Krishna movement, here I've been trained for the last few years. I know about Gaudiya Vaishnavism and the culture, and then suddenly he has no interest in supporting me or helping me go to Kathmandu to recuperate from my health. And this was very disappointing for me, and I was quite pissed off, to tell you the truth, and I felt let down, felt let down, and it was another kind of thing about, what is this organization? What's its purpose? What's it doing all? What's it doing for? It's for what's it? How is it valuing its members? How is it valuing me as a person? I was really disturbed by it, and immediately I decided. Well, I went to the embassy to try and figure out if I could go back to England and get repatriated. They didn't want to do it, because I had. They said, you have to go and have a thingy and prove to that you're not infectious with the jaundice and everything like that, to repatriate me. And so I called up my mum. And I'd only seen my mum, gone to the family house once in all these years. I popped over when we were doing something and I went to the house and I cooked a little meal, but I didn't spend the night there or anything. Um, and I phoned up my mum and told her what the situation was. And she was immediately, don't worry, I'll get you a ticket there as soon as possible to come back. And that's what happened. I didn't get a health certificate or something like that. But my goodness, while I was in that in an area where the embassies was, I went into a foreigner's shop where you could get all these foreign imported things, and there was one lady there, and she said, "I would wear sunglasses if I was you. You know, your eyes are like egg yolks." And my eyes whites and my eyes were bright yellow. And somehow or other, I was going to fuff it and actually get on the plane without telling anybody I had jaundice. It's not most probably a very responsible thing to do. But I just kind of like, I couldn't stay there. I was too weak. It was too sick. It was too extreme. I couldn't go to Kathmandu. And it was like a real deflation after this incredible kind of spiritual experience I'd had in Bangladesh with all the people, these great Vaishnavas, and also my godbrothers I was having a pretty good experience with, apart from the authority figures who I had to work with. And this wasn't a really good sign for me about how way things were going in the movement. So and basically, that's what I did. I got a plane and from Dacca and went home to my family, where I hadn't been for years since like I said, I visited them once. This is it, and I didn't really know how long I was going to stay, but that's where I was going, and um, and that's going to be a whole next thing for my next share, which could be tomorrow. So I'm going to carry on with that because there's all these realizations coming and going through this journey about where am I going in this story, where is the Krishna movement, where does it all fit in, and well, you can tune in tomorrow and find out what happens next. Thank you so much again for allowing me to share these stories with you all. Um, as I noticed today when reading through my notes, there's so many things that I'm kind of like glossing over in the actual story, so that if you've liked the story that I've been telling and you actually eventually ever want to read the book from which it's based, there's much more details and subtleties. I'm just giving you a simple overview. I spent a long time writing all these, going into really reliving every detail of all of these different stories. So that will be available. Hopefully, well, we don't really know what's happening, do we? At least in England or anywhere with this lockdown, how it's happening in different countries. They're relaxing it or not, and I don't know if I have to go back to work, I probably won't have as much energy to do these as many shares as I'm doing at the moment. But I want to try. And I spoke to my friend in America today, and I mentioned earlier, and he was going, okay, so when you finish this whole story, because for many people, people say, okay, that's your Krishna ISKCON story. Look how long it's told me just to explain that and all of this and things. There's tons more, your life doesn't stop, This is, and he says, are you going to tell about the story, during the kind of Babri Masjid and stuck in the curfew in Meerut? Are you going to talk about, Russia? Are you going to talk about this or that? And I just thought, I don't know, I don't really know. So for any of you out there who maybe after when I finish this share that comes to the point in the story where I decide to actually leave ISKCON, which is not that long away in the story, and I'm going to do some retrospective. Maybe you can think of questions about different things that you want me to talk about, or in the story that you've heard that you thought maybe not. You want to go back and give more details, or anything really that you think you find interesting me, because you can tell I just love talking, and it's a way of expressing myself and a way for me to enter into the mystery and the meanings of this incredible philosophy that we've encountered, and then the journeys of life that we experience based upon the so-called knowledge and wisdom that we've garnered through all these experiences. How does that operate and work when you go way out of these kind of institutional packages and take this big leap of faith and go into the outside world when the Hare Krishna hypnotic bubble eventually bursts? I'm not going to sing anymore because I've sung enough. Lots of love. Um, as I say, and every day is a new day, and I feel very different every day. And I don't know what I'm going to feel, and have a different rhythm to my life, different things that I'm thinking about. I have to say, I've just started watching an interesting thing on Freud on Netflix. That's learning some things. It's in German with subtitles, and I'm learning quite a good things about that weird story. So did that yesterday. Um, Maybe if other people have some interesting things, they can share those as well. But anyway, for the moment, lots of love. Take care. Don't freak out with all the weird stuff going on. Try and just stay calm and yeah, and don't let it bring you any kind of distress to you, if possible, because there's no use in being distressed and worried and all those negative emotions. Thank you again, everybody. I love you all.